In a quaint village set amidst the rolling hills of the countryside, there lived a young girl named Zara. She was 7 years old, with a bright smile and a curious spirit. Zara had a wonderful and happy family, with loving parents and a warm home. Her mother, Edeora, was a kind and caring person who always put the needs of others before her own. Her father, Obinna, was a successful businessman who provided for his family and showered them with love and attention. Zara's life was filled with laughter and joy, surrounded by her loving family and friends. She spent her days playing with her friends, exploring the village, and helping her mother with household chores. Edeora taught Zara how to cook, clean, and take care of herself. Obinna would often take Zara on trips to the city, where they would visit museums, parks, and other interesting places. But one fateful day, Zara's life took a devastating turn. Her mother, Edeora, fell ill with a rare disease that the doctors couldn't cure. Despite the best efforts of the medical team, Edeora's condition worsened, and she eventually passed away, leaving Zara and her father heartbroken. Obinna was consumed by grief, and Zara felt lost and alone. She missed her mother dearly and struggled to come to terms with the loss. Her father, in an attempt to fill the void left by Edeora's passing, decided to take a new wife, a woman named Nkechi. At first, Zara tried to be open-minded and welcoming to her new stepmother. However, it soon became apparent that Nkechi was not interested in being a loving and caring parent to Zara. Instead, she was cold, distant, and often cruel, making Zara feel like an outsider in her own home. Nkechi made Zara do all sorts of odd jobs, treating her more like a servant than a daughter. She would send Zara to the stream to fetch water, even in the pouring rain. She would make Zara hawk goods on the street, exposing her to the harsh sun and the dangers of the road. She would make Zara cook meals for the entire household, even though Zara was just 13 years old. And she would make Zara wash clothes by hand, until her fingers were raw and sore. As Zara went about her chores, she would often remember her mother's love and kindness. She would recall the way Edeora used to hug her, the way she used to make her laugh, and the way she used to make her feel safe and loved. Zara would often find herself thinking, "Mama would never treat me like this. Mama would always make me feel loved and special." These memories of her mother's love gave Zara the strength to carry on, even in the face of Nkechi's cruelty. As time passed, Zara became increasingly withdrawn and isolated. She felt like she had lost not only her mother but also her father, who seemed more interested in pleasing his new wife than in being a supportive and loving parent to Zara. One day, while wandering through the village, Zara stumbled upon a lost dog. The dog was dirty, hungry, and scared, but Zara saw something in its eyes that touched her heart. She took the dog home, fed it, bathed it, and nursed it back to health. As she cared for the dog, Zara found comfort and solace in its presence. The dog, whom she named Rocky, became her constant companion, her confidant, and her friend. For the first time since her mother's passing, Zara felt like she had found a sense of purpose and belonging. Rocky would follow Zara everywhere, tail wagging, and ears perked up. He would sit by her side as she did her homework, and he would even sleep next to her at night. Zara loved Rocky with all her heart, and he loved her just the same. As Zara and Rocky grew closer, they began to go on adventures together. They would explore the village, play in the fields, and go on long walks through the countryside. Rocky became Zara's escape from the cruelty and neglect she suffered at the hands of Nkechi. But despite the joy that Rocky brought to her life, Zara's situation at home continued to deteriorate. Nkechi's cruelty and neglect took a toll on Zara's mental and emotional well-being. She felt trapped and alone, with no one to turn to. One day, Obinna discovered the truth about how Nkechi had been treating Zara. He was shocked and heartbroken, realizing too late that he had made a terrible mistake in marrying Nkechi. He immediately confronted Nkechi, demanding that she leave the house and never come back. As Obinna stood up to Nkechi, Zara felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had been living in fear of her stepmother's wrath for far too long. But now, with her father finally taking a stand, Zara felt like she could breathe again. Nkechi, however, was not one to go down without a fight. She sneered at Obinna, her eyes flashing with anger. "You regret this," she spat, before storming out of the house. Obinna turned to Zara, his eyes filled with concern. "I'm so sorry, Zara," he said, pulling her into a hug. "I should have stood up to her a long time ago." Zara hugged him back, feeling a sense of gratitude towards her father. "It's okay, Dad," she said. "I'm just glad you're here for me now." As they hugged, Rocky, Zara's loyal dog, wagged his tail and barked happily, sensing that the atmosphere in the house had finally shifted for the better. But little did they know, Nkechi's departure was only the beginning of a new set of challenges for Zara and her father. Challenges that would test their courage, their love for each other, and their determination to rebuild their lives. Zara couldn't shake off the feeling of unease after her encounter with Nkechi. She felt like she was walking on eggshells, waiting for Nkechi to make her next move. She tried to focus on her schoolwork and her time with Rocky, but she couldn't help feeling anxious. She would often look over her shoulder, expecting to see Nkechi lurking in the shadows. One day, Zara's father sat her down and had a talk with her. "Zara, I know you're scared of Nkechi, but I want you to know that I'm here for you," he said. "I do everything in my power to protect you." Zara felt a surge of gratitude towards her father. She knew he was trying to make up for lost time, and she appreciated his efforts. But just as things were starting to feel better, Nkechi struck again. This time, she didn't just threaten Zara, she took action. Zara came home from school one day to find that Rocky was missing. She searched the entire house, but there was no sign of him. She felt a wave of panic wash over her as she realized that Nkechi must have taken him. Zara's father was furious when he found out what had happened. He immediately called the police and reported Rocky missing. But as the days went by, there was no sign of Rocky. Zara was heartbroken, and she felt like she was losing hope. As the days went by, Zara's father tried to make amends for his past mistakes. He spent more time with Zara, listening to her and trying to understand her feelings. He also made sure to provide for her needs and give her the love and attention she deserved. Zara, however, was still struggling to forgive her father. She felt like he had abandoned her when she needed him most, and she couldn't understand why he had married Nkechi in the first place. One day, Zara's father sat her down and explained everything. He told her about how he had been lonely and grieving after her mother's passing, and how Nkechi had seemed like a kind and caring person at first. He also told Zara about how he had realized his mistake and tried to make things right, but Nkechi had refused to change her ways. He apologized to Zara for not being stronger and for not protecting her from Nkechi's cruelty. Zara listened to her father's words, and for the first time, she saw the pain and regret in his eyes. She realized that he was truly sorry for his mistakes and that he loved her deeply. Slowly but surely, Zara began to forgive her father. She saw the effort he was making to be a better parent, and she appreciated his love and support. As Zara and her father worked on rebuilding their relationship, they also worked on finding Rocky. They searched the entire village, put up posters, and even offered a reward for any information about Rocky's whereabouts. And then, just when they were about to give up hope, they received a call from an anonymous source. The caller told them that Rocky was being held in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the village. Zara and her father rushed to the warehouse, their hearts racing with excitement and fear. They found Rocky, safe and sound, and were reunited at last. But their joy was short-lived, as they soon realized that Nkechi was behind Rocky's kidnapping. She had been seeking revenge against Zara, and Zara and her father were shocked and outraged by Nkechi's actions. They couldn't believe that she would stoop so low as to kidnap Rocky. "We need to go to the police," Zara's father said, his voice firm with determination. Zara nodded in agreement. She was still shaking with fear and anger, but she knew that they had to take action. Together, they went to the police station and filed a report. The police officer listened to their story and promised to do everything in his power to bring Nkechi to justice. As they left the police station, Zara felt a sense of relief wash over her. She knew that they had taken the first step towards bringing Nkechi to account for her actions. But little did they know, Nkechi was not going to go down without a fight. She had a plan, and she was determined to see it through. The next day, Zara and her father received a threatening message from Nkechi. She warned them to drop the charges against her, or else she would make them pay. Zara was terrified. She didn't know what Nkechi was capable of, and she didn't want to find out. But her father was resolute. "We're not going to back down," he said. "We're going to see this through to the end." And with that, they steeled themselves for what was to come. They knew that it wouldn't be easy, but they were determined to bring Nkechi to justice. Father, and she had stopped at nothing to get it. As the days went by, Zara and her father faced increasing harassment from Nkechi. She would call them at all hours of the night, threatening them and trying to intimidate them. But Zara's father refused to back down. He knew that they had done nothing wrong, and he was determined to see justice served. One day, the police arrived at their doorstep with a warrant for Nkechi's arrest. Zara and her father watched as the police took Nkechi away, finally bringing an end to the harassment and intimidation. As they watched Nkechi being driven away in a police car, Zara felt a sense of relief wash over her. She knew that she and her father were finally safe. But just as they were about to breathe a sigh of relief, the police officer turned to them and said, "There's something else you should know." Zara's heart skipped a beat as the officer continued, "Nkechi wasn't walking alone. She had an accomplice, someone who helped her kidnap Rocky." Zara's eyes widened in shock as the officer revealed the identity of Nkechi's accomplice. The police officer's words hung in the air like a challenge. Zara's mind was racing with questions. Who could it be? Someone they knew? Someone they trusted? And then, the officer dropped the bombshell. "It was your father's business partner, Mr. Johnson." Zara's eyes widened in shock. Mr. Johnson. The man who had been like an uncle to her. The man who had always been so kind and supportive. She couldn't believe it. She felt like her whole world had been turned upside down. Her father's face was ashen. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. "How could he?" he whispered. The police officer shook his head. "We're still investigating, but it looks like Mr. Johnson was in deep financial trouble. He stood to gain a lot from your father's business, and he was willing to do whatever it took to get it." Zara felt a wave of anger wash over her. How could Mr. Johnson do this to them? How could he betray their trust like this? But as she looked at her father, she saw the pain and sadness in his eyes. She knew that he was hurting, and she wanted to comfort him. "It's okay, Dad," she said, putting her arms around him. "We'll get through this together." And as they hugged, Zara knew that she had finally found the strength and courage to face whatever challenges came their way. As the news of Mr. Johnson's betrayal spread, Zara's father was faced with a difficult decision. He had to decide whether to press charges against his former business partner and friend. Zara knew that her father was torn. On the one hand, he wanted to see justice served and Mr. Johnson held accountable for his actions. On the other hand, He didn't want to ruin Mr. Johnson's life and family. As they sat down to discuss the matter, Zara's father looked at her with tears in his eyes. "What do you think I should do, Zara?" he asked. Zara took a deep breath and thought for a moment. She knew that this was a difficult decision, but she also knew that her father needed her guidance. "I think you should do what's right, Dad," she said finally. "If Mr. Johnson broke the law and hurt us, he should face the consequences." Her father nodded slowly, a look of determination on his face. "You're right, Zara. I'll press charges." As they hugged, Zara knew that her father had made the right decision. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way to ensure that justice was served. The trial was a difficult and emotional experience for Zara and her father. They had to relieve the pain and trauma of the past few months, and they had to face Mr. Johnson in court. But in the end, justice was served. Mr. Johnson was found guilty and sentenced to prison. As they walked out of the courtroom, Zara felt a sense of relief wash over her. It had been a long and difficult journey, but finally, justice had been served. Her father put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "I'm so proud of you, Zara," he said. "You've been so strong and brave throughout all of this." Zara smiled and leaned into his side. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad," she said. As they walked, they were met with a surprise. Rocky, Zara's beloved dog, was waiting for them outside the courtroom, wagging his tail and barking excitedly. Zara squealed with delight and dropped to her knees to hug Rocky. "Rocky. Oh, I've missed you so much," she exclaimed. Her father smiled and scratched Rocky behind the ears. "I think someone's happy to see us," he said. As they hugged Rocky and celebrated their victory, Zara knew that she had finally found happiness again. She had her father, Rocky, and a sense of closure and justice. But as they walked away from the courtroom, Zara's father turned to her with a serious expression. "Zara, there's something else I need to tell you," he said. Zara's heart skipped a bit as she wondered what her father was going to say next. Was it something good, or something bad? "What is it, Dad?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her father took a deep breath before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot about our family and our future," he said. "And I've decided that it's time for us to start a new chapter in our lives." Zara's eyes widened with excitement as she wondered what her father had planned. Was it a new home, a new school, or something even more exciting? "What do you mean, Dad?" she asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. Her father smiled and put his arm around her shoulders. "Let's just say that our future is looking brighter than ever," he said. And with that, Zara knew that she had a lot to look forward to. She had her father, Rocky, and a bright future ahead of her. What more could she ask for? As they walked away from the courtroom, Zara's father revealed his surprise. "I've decided to take a break from the city and move to a quieter town," he said. "A place where we can start fresh and leave the past behind." Zara's eyes widened with excitement. "Really, Dad? That sounds amazing," she exclaimed. Her father smiled. "I'm glad you're excited, kiddo. I think this is exactly what we need." And so, they packed their bags and said goodbye to the city. They moved to a beautiful town surrounded by nature, where they could finally find peace and happiness. Zara started at a new school, made new friends, and thrived in her new environment. Her father found a new job and started rebuilding his life. Rocky, of course, was happy to be surrounded by nature and went on many adventures with Zara. As they sat on their porch, watching the sunset, Zara turned to her father and smiled. "Thank you, Dad," she said. "This is the best decision you ever made." Her father put his arm around her and pulled her close. "I'm glad you're happy, kiddo," he said. "We are going to make the most of our new life and create many happy memories together." And so, they lived happily ever after, surrounded by love, nature, and a bright future.